Antonio Brown is in New Orleans working out for the Saints. Sources have told our Adam Schefter. Brown is currently being investigated by the NFL under its personal conduct policy after a lawsuit was filed alleging sexual assault by his former trainer. According to Josina Anderson, Brown met with the NFL for 8 hours last month as a part of this investigation. Here's Adam Schefter with more.
Before anyone gets too fired up about this whole situation, keep in mind the Saints have an interest. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought him in. But the NFL still has an active, ongoing investigation regarding Antonio Brown that has not been wrapped up. The league has to do that before he could play again. But the Saints are doing their due diligence for if and when Antonio Brown is eventually cleared and is allowed to play again, which we don't know when that will be. So Antonio Brown is not going to be playing on Sunday. I would say it's unlikely he'll be playing in the postseason if the Saints decide to make that move. And again, there still are many factors that have to unfold here before we can figure out if and when Antonio Brown would be allowed to resume his NFL career.
Lewis, if Antonio Brown is allowed to play, how would he impact the Saints?
Well, you got to think of the Saints like this, all right? When you look at the wide receiver core of the Saints, they have a guy in Michael Thomas who really is a three-position player, meaning he can play the X, which is basically the split end, the Z, which is the flanker, and the E, which is the guy who's in the slot. Think of where Julian Edelman plays. And the reason why he's so difficult to defend is because he is proficient at playing all three of those positions. They move him all over the place. They have to move him all over the place because they don't want anybody ever getting a beat on where he's going to be. Bringing a guy like Antonio Brown. In Pittsburgh, he did the same thing that Michael Thomas did, just in a different packaging, but did the same types of things, and people still couldn't slow him down. They could not slow him. Now think of it like this. Drew Brees, at the level that he's playing at right now, with Michael Thomas, with Antonio Brown, with Alvin Kamara, with Latavius Murray, with Sean Payton calling the plays. Forget it. It's curtains. You won't be able to do anything with this offense. So that's why, from a pure football perspective, if you're in the personnel department of the Saints, you're saying, please let this happen. If you're ownership, if you're the GM, you're going, I want this to happen. Let's see what the league is going to do as far as investigating Antonio Brown and ultimately what they decide on doing him. And then is it just in our best interest to go ahead and bring him into our locker room? Because it's never been an issue about what Antonio can do on the football field. It's always about what he does to your football team off the field, in the locker room, away from the game. That's always been the problem. That will probably continue to be the problem. And that's going to be something that the league is going to have to rule on before he signs anywhere.
Would he be able to reel that off-the-field antics in for long enough to help them in the postseason?
Yeah, but, listen to what Adam just said in his report right there. It's highly unlikely that he plays this offseason, that he plays this postseason, rather. Look, in the short term, as a short-term guy, yeah, of course he could give your offense a bump. He would give them a tremendous boost. He would, without a doubt, take New Orleans and put them from right below or even with San Francisco to make them the odds-on favorite in the NFC. Yeah. But the odds are he's not going to play this postseason. So they're looking at this long-term, which is kind of surprising to me. It's surprising. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. I know Schefter, he always has all the inside scoop and all the inside information. But if Antonio Brown is on the Saints this postseason, they're the clear-cut favorite to represent the NFC coming out of that conference. It's a no-brainer because of how good he is. The question is the internal drama, because what we know about AB is he's had chance after chance after chance. Remember, before there was ever Oakland, there was Pittsburgh. Before there was ever the Patriots, there was Oakland. So the question is, can being on the Saints, can being in this organization, will it let him course correct? Because what we know is Mike Tomlin, a phenomenal manager of people, he couldn't even keep Antonio Brown in check. Then you go to John Gruden. He seems very laid back as far as how he allowed things to unfold, and he couldn't keep AB in check. Then you have the Patriots, who can just about keep everything in check, and they couldn't rally up Antonio Brown. So my question is, was it necessary? I don't know. But I do think if they do have Antonio Brown, now they're the odds-on, clear-cut, elite favorite. They're going for it all with this move.
Yeah, what's interesting about this, and this really kind of gets off the subject of what this is about, which is whether or not he can help them on the football field. The only person ultimately, the only organization ultimately, the only outside influence ultimately that can help Antonio Brown's Antonio Brown. That's it. I mean, you've seen he's gone to the most stringent, most structured organization, maybe in professional sports, as far as holding players accountable for their performance on and off the football field, as far as are you contributing to a winning effort, and that being the Patriots. And he wouldn't do it there. He's not going to do it anywhere because of what outside people are trying to tell him to do. It's going to be because I'm tired of what's going on with me personally, and I'm going to fix my own house personally first before I try to contribute to anyone else. And if he can do that, Look, remember this. It's been a long time since we've seen number 84 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is when he was at his best. Go YouTube some clips of this guy. There's a reason why people want to start kicking the tires on him.
No doubt.
He's that special.
The real debate to me is the risk worth the reward? Mm-hmm. Because even if you do bring in Antonio Brown, and remember, the Saints will take a chance. Dez Bryant last year, he had sat out all year. Saints signed him. Unfortunately, Dez got hurt. The Saints are definitely trying to make the necessary moves to win it all. You know how hard it is to win the whole thing. But you see right there what AB can do when it comes down to him as a player. But is the risk worth the reward, Lewis? Because the Saints have a great thing. They don't have a good thing. Mm-hmm. They have a great thing. From the culture in the locker room to the coaching staff to the quarterback. Is Antonio Brown worth it? That's truly the debate in the question.
Yeah, and that's where they're having the right now. When you're talking about doing your due diligence, it's not just about a workout. I don't care about a workout with Antonio. What's he going to do? Go out there and run a couple slants, a post, a go route, and so we can all sit there, you know, like scouts do, hit that posture where they sit there and go,
formality.
Yeah, like, who cares about that? What they're trying to figure out right now is what are you doing to get that space between your ears in check, to figure out whether or not the risk is worth the reward. Because you're right. It takes one guy like this with a strong personality who could totally undo everything else that you built. And that you're right. You would sit here and you go, why? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that, whether it be short-term or long-term? Because they have a lot of pieces in place to be good for a long time in New Orleans. They really do. So why would you bring in an older player who has shown that he can be a very disruptive force? That's because of this. And I've sat in personnel meetings. I sat in them for 12 years. Talent trumps character. Mm-hmm. And this guy's a unique talent. So you will kick the tires and you will go an extra mile for someone like this than you would for someone who wasn't as special as this. Simple as that.
As former players, put yourselves in this position, what would you think as the teammates on the Saints who might now be playing with Antonio Brown?
If I'm on the Saints roster, I would probably rather go without him. Just because we've gotten this far without him, both this year and last year. And I understand they didn't get to the Super Bowl last year, but you could put that on the referees more than anything. But we've gotten this far without him. I'm sitting in my locker room and I'm like, for what, coach? Yeah. For what, GM? For what, Sean Payton? Like, Drew Brees is a man. Mm-hmm. We still have Kamara. We have Michael Thomas. We don't need him. And if I'm in that locker room, I'm sitting here like, it's more risk than it is a benefit. Not to mention, if you were to ever sign a guy like him, somebody has to get cut. And you have to remember the camaraderie of teams. The dudes this far into the season, they actually care about each other. They love each other. They're riding for each other. He's taken somebody's snaps, somebody who's helped the Saints get to 12-3, somebody who's helped the Saints lead the NFC South. So if I'm sitting in the locker room, I would rather not.
Yeah, and I you know, obviously as ex-professional players, and even the guys who are playing right now, obviously you want to win. You want to win as many games as possible, and you want to make a lot of money. There's no question about that. But I will tell you this: players aren't necessarily just mercenaries who don't have personal feelings about how players conduct themselves. And when someone comes into your team, whether you're a championship caliber team or your team stinks and is drafted in the top 10, players don't like guys who come in and make it all about them. Yeah. I don't care if it's a championship team or if it's a team that's really has a lot of work to do. When people do that and people are as brazen, as self-centered as this guy has been, instantly, I know in my experience, that is a huge, huge turnoff.
And Antonio,
in every way.
Antonio Brown might not even make it all about him, but the media will.
Sure.
So even if Antonio Brown Lewis is completely course-corrected, comes in buttoned up and is like, hey, it's not about me, it's about the team. You want to know what they're going to ask Michael Thomas? So how is it with Antonio Brown out on the football field?
Right.
And more questions to Michael Thomas about AB is less times rehabbing, less time.
And I'll tell you, the last thing I'll say about this, and I know we need to go on this subject, but I will say this. I'm one of the people, look, I'm actually rooting for Antonio to course correct, as you put it, and actually have him be someone who people remember because of that, because everyone loves a redemption story. Yep. Everyone loves when people show self-awareness and improve themselves. I don't want the lasting image for Antonio Brown to be, this was the knucklehead who was running around doing YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff and ruined the end of his career. I hope he does turn it around so we can see him on the football field because the NFL needs people like this in order to keep this whole train moving. And when I say need people like this, unique, special talents that all of us wish we could be as good as he was. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm assuming we will find out very quickly what happens with the Saints and Antonio Brown. But this morning.
Doing great. A full 2 hours of debating. Stephen A., you know what? No,
You are in the Stephen A. seat.
Yeah, I'm not going to be like you, though.
So bring your Stephen A. energy.
You better be looking forward to a tweet from him.
You know he's
it's
watching.
coming.
You know he's watching, sitting there like, Yeah, I know he is. It's good, though. Let's do it.
All right, well, I'm glad we have you here because we have a lot of football to get into. And actually, we have some breaking news that we're going to get off to.